This is a story about how someone bought super cheap housing. Naturally, he thought it would be an awesome investment, and he fell into the trap of low prices. Let's talk about it. This story will be especially interesting for many people because most people who come to the Batumi market want to buy cheap, specifically cheap, real estate, and they equate that with liquidity, yes. In other words, the cheaper I buy a property, the more interesting and liquid it will be. But why? Because the logic is very simple. If I bought it at the lowest possible price, then someone else must buy it from me for more. But that's not how it works at all. Here's what happened. One day, a potential client calls me and we start talking about the market and so on. He says, Evgeny, I found a really great deal. It's $570 per square meter. When I hear someone say it's a really great deal and the price is low, I immediately get suspicious because, well, I usually know what gets sold for that kind of money here. And then he says the following, I found an amazing apartment in Makinjauri. It's a building on the first line. Yes, the construction is a bit delayed, but whatever, as they say. The price is $570 black frame. The building is now promised to be finished and everything will be great. I'll sell it for $1,500. I say, wait, hold on. Let's even set aside the fact that the building might not be finished. Okay? Let's imagine that it will be finished, so to speak, even though it's already been under construction for about 7 years. All right, let's say it gets finished in about 2 years. Now let's talk about the price. You buy it for $570 and in 2 years it's finished. How much are you going to sell it for? He goes, well, $1,500, $1,600. I say, where did you get those prices from? In Batumi, an economy class apartment with at least a decent renovation, you can find for, well, $1,100, maybe $1,000. Sometimes you can even come across options for $900 for an apartment with renovations. Why do you think you'll be able to sell it for $1,100? Well, I checked the prices, I looked them up, browsed through them. I said, do you understand that the prices you see online are not the actual prices at which this real estate is really being sold? The prices at which it actually sells, if a listing appears online, it usually disappears within a week. Everything you see left over is mostly the housing that's been sitting there for half a year or even a year. And that's just what people are wishing for. Those aren't the prices for which you can actually sell that apartment. Naturally, the person was skeptical about what I said because how could that be? After all, the offer seems good. But here's how the math works out. A person buys an apartment for $570 per square meter, plus they'll spend another $500 anyway, more or less, on finishing the apartment. In the end, the total price will be $1,050. But here's the thing. For $1,050, he gets a finished apartment, but with some risks of waiting, yes, because it's not clear when, so to speak, this property will be completed, and there are a lot of buts and a lot of questions. So when he sells it, it will be for about the same amount, $1,050, maybe $1,100. If he puts a lot of money into a better renovation, well, maybe he'll sell it for a bit more, maybe it will be $1,200 or $1,300. But the problem is that Batumi's economy class housing is very peculiar, very peculiar. There are issues with soundproofing, waterproofing, and the materials used for the facades. There are just a ton of issues, including with ventilation. Naturally, the people who buy this kind of housing, they, to some extent, are willing to put up with these shortcomings, yeah. But why is that? They're willing to tolerate these shortcomings because of the price. So when someone says, I'll buy this economy option from you, but sorry, you have to be so kind as to give me the best price. In other words, the key idea for the person who will buy this product after it's completed is to get the absolute best price. But what's the main catch here? It's that winning in the market by playing the best price game is almost impossible. Why? Because there will always be someone who needs to sell faster, more urgently. Accordingly, they'll be selling and offering a better price than you, yes. And you've poured money into renovations. Naturally, you want to sell for a higher price. As a result, your property sits on the market for a year, 2, even 3 at your price. Don't believe me? You can run this experiment yourself. Buy a similar property at the lowest price and see for yourself that I'm right. But that's not the point. I tell him the following. Why do you want to buy at $570 per square meter? He says, well, still it's really great, a really cool price. I say, well, wonderful, get something in Batumi for the same money. He says, but where will I find it? I say, you'll find it in Batumi on the new boulevard, in other locations. You'll find the same kind of economy class buildings, the same shell and core condition, with the same issues, also for those same $500, $600. He says, well, I haven't seen any offers like that. I say, if you haven't seen any offers, you just haven't looked hard enough. And the main point is that there are plenty of these apartments. In reality, there are lots of apartments for $500, $600 per square meter, but if you add in the renovation costs and then look at the final price, you realize that all your investments, more or less, will end up at a price that, frankly, is no longer interesting for making a profit. Yeah, so basically, at best, you sell it for what you bought it for, right? But if you also factor in the risks, for example, the risk of the building not being completed, delays and so on, then that potential profit, say $100 or $200 per square meter that you're counting on, can very quickly disappear, and most likely you won't see it at all. And there are simply hundreds, if not thousands, of such examples on the market. This is actually a very, very big problem. If you're interested in understanding how the market works, which properties are overvalued, which are undervalued, where you have a chance and potential to earn, and where you absolutely do not, follow the link to my Telegram channel. There you'll find several very useful articles. Reading them will only take you 5 to 10 minutes, maybe a bit more, but you'll gain a lot of valuable expert insights. You'll definitely gain a deep understanding of the market, and you'll be able to figure out what is worth it and what isn't, specifically in your situation. I've pinned the link in the description. The main problem is that a person creates an illusory idea of the final price, the price at which they supposedly, hypothetically, can sell this property. But in reality, that's not the case at all. The second big problem concerns people who want to buy comfort class housing. This is no longer economy class, it's comfort. It's already more or less decent housing. And here too there's a big question, because right now many developers are building, and naturally this comfort class housing is more expensive right from the start. That is, roughly speaking, at the beginning, say after 6 months or a year of construction, developers are selling this property without finishing, at prices ranging from about $1,000 to $1,600 per unit. This is the price without finishing. And what's the main catch here? It's that if you add the finishing, it comes out to, well, depending, maybe $1,600, maybe $2,000 per square meter, sometimes even $2,300. The catch is that ready-made real estate, already fully finished in houses of the same comfort class, often even in a better location. So sometimes people buy in the third, fourth or fifth row of this construction, but already on the first line, ready-made real estate costs, for example, $1,300 per square meter. This is in New Batumi. Sometimes you even come across prices of $1,250 in houses of the same comfort class. So the sad thing is that a lot of people, when they come because of advertising or call specialists, are offered these new buildings as the best solution, like, oh, go ahead, buy it, you'll make money. But they forget to mention that right from the start they're buying overpriced real estate. That is, as soon as a person buys this property, they're already down $300 to $500 per square meter at that very moment. If they bought it for $500 per square meter more, they still have to wait for the construction, which, roughly speaking, will take 2 or 3 years. But they could have bought a finished, move-in ready apartment right now for $500 less per square meter. And that's where the big catch lies as well. And unfortunately, many people fall into this trap simply because they don't know the market. And here, of course, a lot of specialists are motivated to sell these complexes, to sell as many as possible, as quickly as possible, and so on. Why? Because, well, that's their income, that's how they make their living, and they basically don't see anything else in this market. But the point is, a person comes in and naturally asks for the minimum possible down payment. They ask, of course, for the longest possible installment plan, and the market accommodates this. Both developers and realtors meet this demand. But at what cost? At the cost of you simply buying a product at a very, very inflated price. The price might not even be inflated if, for example, the secondary market was selling at the same price or higher. But since the secondary market is now much cheaper, and in similar buildings that are in no way worse than what is being offered, so to speak, here lies the issue. This is also a big problem, so be careful, don't fall into this trap.